What's the most famous incident you can ever think of in American history of people being murdered simply because they were Jewish? It has to be the one that just happened recently of Sarah and Yaron outside of a Jewish museum in Washington, D.C., where an extreme left-wing radical, somebody who attends rallies with PSL, Party for Socialism and Liberation, drove to Washington, D.C., pulled out a gun and murdered the couple and started shouting, "Free, free Palestine," which has been often referred to as the modern-day version of Heil Hitler. But what you don't see is the media referencing this couple as a Jewish couple. Clearly, it was an act of anti-Semitism. Clearly, they were murdered because they were Jewish. Clearly, that was his motivation. Yet, they only described the couple as embassy staffers, or an Israeli couple, or a couple outside a Jewish museum. The only time you're going to hear the word Jewish is that they worked at a Jewish embassy or they were at a Jewish event, but you're not hearing the media refer to them as Jewish. Here's a couple of examples.
D.C. prosecutors say they're considering the death penalty for the man accused of murdering 2 Israeli embassy employees.
Here in D.C. of those 2 Israeli embassy staffers, Scripps News.
We're learning new horrifying details about the shooting of a couple who worked at the Israeli embassy in D.C.
Embassy staffers, a young couple. Do you want to know why they're not called Jewish? That's what you have me for. It's because they were Christian. Oh, they were Jewish, but they were Messianic Jews, Jews for Jesus. And in Israel, they're not called Christians. They're called Nortzim, Nazarene. And they're called many other things, such as heretics. But there's one thing that they are not called, and they are not allowed to be called. And that's Jewish. Oh yeah. I've talked to a rabbi who said Jesus wasn't Jewish. This has been going on since before Jesus was crucified. If they found out you were a believer in Yeshua as the Mashiach, you are not allowed into the synagogue. There's a story in the Bible about a blind man that Jesus healed. And the Pharisees came and talked to the parents, and they asked the parents, who healed this guy? Because they wanted the parents to admit that Jesus did it, so they can persecute them. The parents knew that if they would have said anything that, yeah, this guy Jesus healed him, then they would have been accused of being a follower of the way, and they would have been banned from the synagogue. So they said, hey, he's old enough, he's been bar mitzvahed, you ask him. They were smart. They wouldn't even answer the question because they knew about this original cancel culture that's been going on ever since Jews have been believing in Jesus. And so if you go back and you listen and you have that ear now, you will hear that they are not described as Jews.
The suspect in the killing of 2 Israeli embassy staffers in Washington, D.C.
A breaking news update tonight. We're uncovering more about the background of a Chicago man accused in the deadly shooting of 2 Israeli embassy employees in Washington.
The assassination of a young couple outside a Jewish museum in Washington.
Right, some serious news. The man accused of killing 2 Israeli embassy staffers in Washington, D.C.
A young couple, embassy staffers. Were they killed because they were a young couple who just happened to be walking down the streets of Washington, D.C., or were they killed because they were Jewish? Or were they killed because they were embassy staffers? Or were they killed because they were Jewish? It's a rhetorical question. They were killed because they were Jewish. It's the most famous murder of Jews in the history of the United States. The most famous murder because they were Jewish. So you can't be on both sides of the fence. You can't continue this rabbinic policy of this racist policy of erasing somebody's identity because you don't agree with the way they interpret Isaiah chapter 53 or Psalm chapter 22. And these useful idiots that are reading the teleprompters, they don't even realize what they're doing. Very minute population, a percentage of the population in America have any idea of how this is being presented. This policy has to stop. Raising children to hate Christians has to stop. Because they're going to grow up and they're going to learn that it is their duty to erase fellow Jews if they believe in Yeshua. to outcast them, to cancel culture them, to not allow them into your synagogue. What about the print media? Let's take a look at the print media. Okay, here's a headline. What we know about the accused gunman in Washington. The suspect, Elias Rodriguez, was charged with gunning down 2 Israeli embassy workers outside a Jewish museum in Washington. Okay, so they use the word Israeli embassy, which is another word I've seen this couple described as, Israeli. But here's the word Jewish, right? Outside a Jewish museum. Yeah, okay, it's okay to call a museum Jewish, but not the couple Jewish. Like, literally, they are not even allowed to be buried in a Jewish cemetery in Israel. You can be an apostate, a total apostate. You can deny the existence of God, Yahweh. You can be an atheist and be buried in a Jewish cemetery in Israel. But if you believe Yeshua, you're done. Okay, here's another example from a New York Times reporter. This lady reports out of Chicago. And let's see what she says here. Julia Bozeman. Oh, okay, hold that thought. Elias Rodriguez, a Chicago resident, was charged on Thursday with first-degree murder and other crimes in the killings of 2 Israeli embassy aides outside a Jewish museum. See that? A Jewish couple was not murdered. A couple of staffers were murdered, right? So I actually emailed her. Let me see if she got back to me, because I asked her, was her story edited to remove the fact that this couple was Jewish, or does she do it consciously? I don't usually have good luck hearing back from reporters. Occasionally I do. Let's see here. Fox, Facebook. Yep. No, she hasn't gotten back to me. So, yeah, this is unconscionable. They're basically making it look to be just a random crime, is the way they're reporting it. But, you know, the whole world thinks that they're reporting an act of anti-Semitism, but what they're doing is sneaking a little fastball by you, if you don't already know about this. So let's try another one. Oh, and this isn't necessarily a right versus left. This is a religious edict by Rabbinic Judaism, which is not the same as Judaism. Rabbinic Judaism is a lot of man-made traditions relying heavily on the Talmud, the oral law, the written edicts of man, not the word of God. So just to clarify that. But here we have an example from Fox News. What's it say here? I had cut off half of it. 2 Israeli embassy staff members killed. Now, we've all seen the videos of the media when they have the same talking points, and you'll see a split screen of like 20 different screens, and they're all saying the exact same thing. Why is this a situation where they would all be saying the exact same thing? I mean, I know why. I'm explaining it to you why. Because they were Christians and they can't be identified as Jewish because they were Christians, as if it's 2 different things. Christianity, i.e. the following of Yeshua as the Messiah, the Christ, is a continuation of the Torah, of Judaism. That's why it's called Messianic Judaism, because they believe in the Messiah, Yeshua. You can say, oh, we're waiting for the second Messiah to come. You know, the first one will be Ben Yosef, the suffering servant. And then Ben David, the victorious king. No, Jesus had to die. The lamb had to be sacrificed first. That's the way Judaism works. That's the way we need a blood atonement. Don't ask me to explain God's ways. That's just the way it is. So you want an example of somebody in the media who will describe this couple as Messianic Jews? You have to go to a Messianic source. Okay, now I need to read to you, if you're scholarly and you're interested in that kind of historical context of how some of these things get started, from something called the Birkat Hamanim. It has to do with heretics within Judaism. And it was added to the Amidah late in the first century when Christianity first started to grow. And you got to understand that these were all Jewish people. These were all Jewish believers in the Messiah. And so this was added to a prayer source around 90 AD, okay, in Yevna by Gamaliel. Now, Paul the Apostle was trained by Gamaliel. Anyhow, this was during a time of intense tension and sectarianism within Judaism following the destruction of the Second Temple, which the Christians didn't participate in. The Christian Jews didn't want to participate in that fight, and so they were persecuted. Just like when Rome was burnt, they persecuted the Christians. I think the Jews too. But there's a heavy persecution on the Christians. So that's what happens a lot of times when you lose or something bad happens. You just blame the minority. So the exact wording of the original is not intact, and the wording of this Birkat Hamanim has evolved to soften the blow. So if Christians read it, they're not going to know what the word manim means. They're just going to keep reading by it. But in the synagogues, believe me, they know this prayer. So I searched for the earliest known source of this prayer, and it wasn't starting to be dumbed down until I think Christianity was spreading in Europe. But this one is from the Cairo Geniza, and it reads approximately like this. A quote, "For the apostates, let there be no hope, and may the kingdom of arrogance be speedily uprooted in our days." Now, I want you to listen to this in the context of rabbis writing to fellow Jews about Messianic Jews. Okay? So, may the kingdom of arrogance be speedily uprooted in our days. So they're talking about we need to uproot these arrogant people. And may the Norzim, the Nazarenes, right? And the Minim, these are the heretics. This is another word for, there's more people that they consider heretics besides the Nazarenes were the followers of Yeshua. May the Nazarenes and the heretics perish in an instant. Let them be blotted out from the book of life and not be inscribed with the righteous. Blessed, O you, O Lord, who humbles the arrogant. So this is the mentality that has been in Rabbinic Judaism. Remember, after the temple was destroyed, that form of Judaism of animal sacrifices could no longer be performed. But that was the intent of the Lord. He wrote that the Messiah would come before the temple was destroyed. The Messiah came, he was crucified, he was the final sacrificial lamb. So now that veil into the temple was torn from top to bottom. I forget how thick it was. I've heard it described as thick as the palm of your hand. We'll just go with that. So anyhow, now you can enter directly into communion with God and seek forgiveness directly with God. You don't need to you don't need to find another man to mediate on your behalf. You don't need to go to a rabbi or a priest or a Levite and bring them something to sacrifice to atone for the sins of you or your family or for a nation. Jesus Christ was the final sacrifice. The temple was destroyed. The Christians took the blame. They were persecuted. They weren't took the blame. Well, they were maybe blamed because they wouldn't help fight. Because people were fighting under the banner of a false Messiah. If I was not a believer, I would have been a zealot. I'm sure I've been described as somebody who would have been a zealot in that generation, and I definitely would have fought against the Romans. Probably would have died. So you just have to have that discernment. I was going to vote for Ted Cruz until I learned to see through his duplicitous way of speaking like a lawyer when he spoke in front of the Gang of Eight, and he was literally calling for a form of amnesty while publicly saying he opposed any amnesty. You got to learn how to read between the lines, and listening to politicians year after year after year, or pastors or rabbis or what have you, you will slowly develop an ability, a type of discernment whether it's God-given or just comes natural over time, on how to read right through the BS, cut right through the BS. And these people not being called Jews, that's intentional. And I saw right through it. And I don't like it. It's got to stop. Peace out.